Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meteor Night. I am really excited that Qualia is able to start putting on this event. I have very fond memories of Meteor Night back when they used to do it regularly. When we were first starting off in Meteor as a company, I used to go to every single event, and it was amazing to talk to everyone and learn what people were working on, and it was just pretty awesome. So I'm super excited to get started on this again. Okay, so my talk is called 10,000 Hours into Meteor. My previous talk that I gave about 2 years ago is 3,000 hours into Meteor. And 10,000 is bigger than 3,000. Therefore, this talk is going to be better. But the main reason why I actually named it 10,000 Hours into Meteor was because I had to name the talk long before I decided what I was going to talk about. And this title is sufficiently ambiguous that it could actually be about anything. There are a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, but I decided to sort of show you guys the tools that Qualia has been building and what I think is possible with Meteor. So first, just a little bit about Qualia. Qualia was founded in early 2015. We are about 100 people, split between Austin and San Francisco. And we recently raised our Series B a few months ago, and we're growing really fast. What we do is we build software for the closing process. So the closing process is sort of what happens during the latter end of the real estate transaction. Lots of different moving pieces, but long story short, it's been pretty scattered across many different pieces of software, email. It's been pretty drawn out and frustrating. So what we do is we build software to bring that all on the same platform. Cool, so let's get started. All right, so Qualia loves Meteor. We are hosting Meteor Night, so that's sort of some evidence that we like Meteor. We've been using it since the very beginning, day one, and it's been just a fantastic experience. The amount of software that we have to build is just huge. The problem that we're solving is very, very complicated. And I actually don't think that we would be where we are today unless we had a tool like Meteor to help us build all these things. And I hope to convince you that Meteor is kind of a unique platform for this sort of rapid development. So I was trying to decide which kind of talks to give. I could have had like a really long PowerPoint and talked about lots of random things. But instead, I decided to just show a lot of demos, because I think demos are way cooler, and I'd like to get started with that. So I'm going to show 3 different internal tools that we've built, and I've built this around a demo that all of you guys can download and use either now or afterwards. Literally everything I'm going to show you is going to be in here. And so this is centered around 3 different open source tools. So the first open source tool is something called Revo. Revo is a live coding environment. I watch a lot of Brett Victor videos, and during a hackathon, I really, really wanted to build something like that we could use at Qualia. So I'm actually going to do a demo showing you how it works. But very briefly, what's going on here is you can click anywhere in this application, and it finds the code underneath your mouse and opens up, it sort of shrinks the screen in the top right, it shrinks it, and you can live edit the code of your application. And as you type, it will actually update the application without a server reload. And there's an alternate view, which is inspired by JS Fiddle, which lets you isolate a particular component and see all of the code that creates that component in the same place. So reval stands for reevaluation. Especially in big Meteor applications, there's a couple issues. So one, as your Meteor application gets bigger, the rebuilds get slower, which is natural but often frustrating. And as your application gets bigger, the mapping between your source code and the actual application itself becomes more and more complicated. So reval is meant to solve both of those problems. One thing worth noting is that there's no reload time, because it's not recompiling the code, and also that it is able to work on both the client and the server. So you guys have probably seen JS Fiddle, pretty cool. Lets you change front-end code. This also lets you change back-end code. So you can modify your entire application from within this environment. It can run entirely in the browser, as I'll show you. But there are also editor plugins that have been contributed by the community that allows you to use this live coding environment inside of the comfort of your editor. So down here, I have a link to the GitHub repo for Revo. OK, cool. So let's do a demo. All right, so I've constructed a demo application where I'm going to use these various plugins. Dima, are you ready? Cool. All right, so first I'm going to clear out the database. This is a little tool that I'll talk about in a minute. So first I'm going to clear out all of the users. Cool. All right, I'm going to name myself Lucas. So what this is just a silly little game that can actually support multiple players at once. All it does is when you click on a ball, you get some points. You get more points the smaller the ball is and the faster it's moving. It shows you a ranking over here of all the players and who's winning. Dima just apparently got some points. But I'm still winning. And soon I will be winning by a lot, as I'll show you later. All right, cool. So as I mentioned, there are 2 modes of reval. So here's the first one. So this just shrunk the application. And one cool thing to note is this actually still works. This is just a mini version of the application. It does some crazy CSS transform stuff. And this mode is very useful for exploring large applications. So this is a very simple application, so it's not as complicated. But I can hold down a button, and it shows me the template that's underneath my mouse. So there's only 2 templates over here. But let's go ahead and open this. So I click, and then it actually finds the code that was underneath my mouse. Let's suppose that I want to start changing some random stuff. So let's say I want it to be inverted. It's a link. Oh, right here. Thank you, Jack. Jack is the creator of Semantic UI, so he knows the syntax really well. All right, so that just inverted the segment. As you can see, it happened instantly. What's neat is it also works for JavaScript. So let's go ahead and open the bubbles over here. And let's go ahead and here's all the drawing code that's drawing on this canvas. Let's go ahead and change the color a little bit, or at least the opacity. So let's say that I think that these are too transparent. There we go. Now it's darker. And you can see the changes over here. I'm going to go ahead and clear these out. This is the other mode. This is JS Fiddle. This is especially fun because you can see all the code at once. So up in the top left, you can see the template HTML code. In the bottom left, you can see the template JavaScript. And in the top right, you can actually see the server code. And as I type, I can have it update. So let's just do a few small tweaks that are kind of fun. So let's suppose I want to increase the velocity. So this is the update loop that changes the position of the balls over time. So I'm going to click. There we go. Let's suppose that I just want to halt it for a second, then return. Notice that it doesn't even appear to be reloading the page at all. It just like magically updates. This is actually reevaluating the code on the server. And this isn't a special trick. This works for Meteor apps in general, and Qualia uses it every single day. And it really, really helps our development process. So let's do something slightly less trivial. So let's suppose that I want to change the color as it bounces off each side of the wall here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the update logic. And here we can see it's checking whether or not the ball is going out of bounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the color. I'm a fan of live coding, so if I make a mistake, that's part of the presentation. OK, so this is going to randomly update the color. And then I have to include the color in the actual collection update. Now we can see that every time it hits the side, it's updating. Maybe one more little neat thing. Let's suppose that I wish to have the radius shrink over time. So let's just do ball.r times 0.99, let's say. And we can update the radius. And now we can see the balls are getting smaller over time. And now let's have them get a little bit bigger. They're quite small right now. Dima apparently has surpassed me, which annoys me. And I will prove him wrong in just a sec. OK, so let's just clear out the balls really fast. That's a mysterious thing that I'm about to talk about. OK, cool. So this is a really awesome way to develop. You can sort of see as you type everything that's changing. And it's especially good for people that are just learning your application. You know, if you go into a complicated application and try to figure out what code governs what, it's almost impossible. And that's why this particular mode is very, very helpful. You know, just the power of being able to mouse over any part of the application and see the code which generated that is immensely helpful. OK, so let's move on to the next thing there. So the next tool I would like to demonstrate here is something called Web Shell. I've already used it a couple times, but what this is it allows you to access the Meteor shell from within your browser. And this is super fun and convenient while you're developing. You know, one of the principles of Brett Victor, who's just this awesome designer, is that you should immediately be able to see the results of your changes. Context switching makes it much harder to develop, and this allows you to stay all in the same place. So what this is there's a key binding, which is control quote, that brings up this little semi-transparent terminal, and you can access the full Meteor shell with completions and color and everything. So this is dev mode only, but one of the things that I've noticed is that in the Meteor community, very few people use the Meteor shell in production, meaning very few people attach a Meteor shell to a running production server. This is a super key thing at Qualia. I have no idea how to run a production Meteor application without doing that. And the before this package this called prod shell, you had to do this very strange song and dance ritual involving like fake dummy files to like get the Meteor shell running. But I've released a package called prod shell, which lets anyone just add this package, and then you can SSH into your Meteor server and open up a Meteor shell. I was also working on a package that makes it so you can access the cool little in-browser Meteor shell in production, but I am concerned about the level of security given the risk there, so I haven't released it quite yet, but maybe I will one day after a bunch of people audit it. Okay, so let's use that. All right, so I am not a fan of Dima beating me. So I'm going to, let's see here. I'm going to find his user ID. Users.find.fetch. Okay, Dima. Apparently Sid, mwahaha, also. I guess Sid guessed the URL there, but. Okay, so I'm going to put in his ID. And, I don't want to remove him, actually. That'd be mean. I'm just going to update. So I'm going to set his score to a really low value. Oh, yeah. Although it looks like Sid might pass me, so I'm also going to up my score. And all I have to do is get rid of the negative sign. There we go. Solidly on the top right there. You can do anything that you could do from a Meteor shell in here. So, I can remove the balls, and then it will start regenerating them. Yep. Cool. So, this is very helpful in addition to Revo. It just gives you this really awesome development environment. Okay. So now I'm going to do something quite ambitious for a live demo. Another thing that's really crucial to how Qualia develops with Meteor is the ability to take CPU profiles in production. So Qadira is an amazing tool, but it is only optimized for performance analysis of a certain kind. It helps you find really slow updates. It helps you find really slow publications, but it's missing a lot of information. If you guys have ever taken a CPU profile inside of the browser, then this probably looks familiar. This is a sampling CPU profile. It turns out that it's also supported by V8, by Node, and you can take it on the server. Once again, you sort of have to do a bit of a song and dance to get it working, and this is a more convenient way of doing that makes it more accessible to the community as a whole. So the package is just called Qualia Profile. It's also open source, so all you have to do is Meteor add Qualia Profile. It has several functions. So one, you can profile the Meteor server both in development and production. Also, interestingly, it allows you to profile code reloads. So for those of you that have large applications, you've probably noticed some slowdown in your code reloading. And this allows you to profile the build process, which as far as I know was never possible before, and see what's slow. So for example, I have been profiling the build process recently, and I noticed that like 30 to 40% of the time is spent in garbage collection. And so what we did is we increased the memory limit on that node process, and that actually improved reload times significantly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you guys an example of using this tool to diagnose a performance problem. And let's hope it works. Cool. Hopefully you can read that. Maybe I can go in just a little bit more. Okay. All right, so I'm going to slow down the balls so I can actually click them. All right, that's more my speed. Also, I'm using a trackpad. I've played this game kind of surprisingly much, given that I made it like 12 hours ago. But I guess that's what you do before you give a presentation. All right, so this is kind of not that many balls, and it's kind of lame. So let's suppose that I want to increase the number of balls. Well, here's my max balls variable over here. And click Save. And now it's going to maintain 15 balls on the screen. Sometimes there may be a few more. All right, so the performance seems fine right now. But as I start clicking through all the balls, then it's getting laggier and laggier. Things are just starting to jump around. And it's pretty unpleasant if you're playing the game. Notice just all the jumping, and now it's like super slow. All right, so how do we figure out what's going on? Well, you could stare at the code, but this will take a minute to figure out what's going on. Wouldn't it be nice if there was something that just told you the function of what was slow? Well, there is, so let's do that. So I'm going to open up the Meteor shell here, and this is similar to some stuff that we do in production. So I'm going to clear it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the profiler from the Qualia profile package. And I'm going to profile the server process for 10 seconds. And during that 10 seconds, I'm going to click hold the balls so I can reproduce the performance problems. So this is going to save a CPU profile file onto my hard drive, and I'll load it up in a sec. OK, got to be quick. Oh, yeah, there we are. Getting some slowness there. Nice. That's what we want. All right, so it's written the profile to disk. So now let's go ahead and open up that profile inside of Chrome. So this is nice. You have the exact same analysis tools that you do when you're profiling client-side code. All right, let's zoom in here. So for those of you that aren't super familiar with CPU profiles, this is called a flame chart. And the x-axis is time. And on the y-axis, you have the call stack that's being executed at a given time. So at this point in time, the top-level function is run with environment, which calls some sort of anonymous function, which calls game loop, which calls create random ball. So it's really not good that there's no idle time in here. The game loop is only supposed to execute every 20 milliseconds, which means there should be a gap between every execution of the game loop. But this is going on for significantly more than 20 milliseconds. So let's take a look. All right, so the game loop function is the main function that we've written. And we can see that almost the entirety of the time that game loop is running, it's spending on create random ball. It also spends a little bit of time on this update balls function, but it's definitely dominated by create random balls. There's also all this other random stuff that's running, and it takes a little bit of practice to see this, but what this is doing, this is parsing the response from MongoDB. One thing that we've noticed in profiling a lot of production code is that an incredible amount of the time is just spent parsing the result from Mongo. So at some point, Qualia will probably offer a bounty, like a monetary bounty, for speeding up the BSON profiler. I think it would pretty much universally speed up all Meteor applications by quite a lot. All right, so let's get back to this specific problem. So we can see that it spends a lot of time in the game loop creating the random ball. We can confirm this by looking at aggregate statistics showing how much time is spent in each function. This ranks them, and we can see that a lot of time is spent in the game loop, 2.3 seconds, and almost all of that is spent in create random ball, which is a sub-function of game loop. So let's take a look at our code. All right, so we have our game loop here, which is just a small loop, and when there are fewer balls than max balls, then it creates a random ball. Here's the create random ball function. What this does is it has a loop where it creates a random ball and then checks if there's sufficient amount of space surrounding that new random ball, because we want to create a ball that's in empty space rather than that's overlapping with other balls. OK, so here's the space-free function. So we noticed in the profile that there's a lot of database lookups, which is kind of curious. You wouldn't think that it would need to do that many lookups. But as you can see here, it's doing balls.find.fetch, and this fetches every single ball from the database. And that's being called every single time space-free is being called. Space-free, if there are a lot of balls in here, might be called many, many times. So this is extremely inefficient, and this is the source of our performance problems. Now, balls isn't changing during this loop, so we only really need to do the lookup once. So let's go ahead and cache it so we only do the lookup once. And then we're going to pass it into space free. Now we need to take this argument. OK. Awesome. So now let's try clicking over here. We can see that there's no lag now. And that seems to fix the performance problem. So that's an example of how you might use this profiling tool in production or in development to diagnose problems. I didn't have to read all the code. That was great. Otherwise, that would have taken quite a long time. So those are all those tools are open source, and I encourage people to check them out and also check out this particular demo. What I'm about to show you is not open source, unfortunately, although pieces of it are gradually becoming open source. As we've matured as a company, we've definitely tried to give back to the Meteor community more, but it's definitely a gradual process. All right. So we call this Eden. Eden is it's essentially interactive documentation that is a running Meteor server that's running all of the core Qualia code and allows you to interact with it and dynamically change it. So we've created a very large library of components that allows to extremely quickly build applications. And some of them are very specific. This is something that a nice sending message modal. Some of them are more commonly used. We have integrated charts. We have something called edit card, which is a convenient way of editing data together. We have onboarding stuff. We have essentially we have tons and tons of stuff. And for the longest time, there was no documentation. And part of the reason why we didn't have documentation is because written documentation doesn't really communicate what everything is supposed to do. I'm a big believer in running live code. All of our interviews, we don't do any whiteboarding. It's all coding. All of this demo did lots of live coding, and I think that's just the way that people learn the best. So let's look at a particular component. So let's look at something called quick search. So quick search binds to a server-side search and allows you to search over that index very easily. It essentially allows you to bind front-end components with back-end components in a very seamless way. The amount of code, this is searching something on the server, and when you select this value, it can also store something on the server. So let's open this up using the tool that I showed you earlier, Fiddle. So we can see all of the code that's used to produce this example. It's quite small. This is all the markup, just some very simple options. And we can actually interactively modify things in here. So right now, it has 10 search results. Let's say that I think that's ugly. So I only want it to have 3. And now it only has 3 search results. And there's tons and tons of options available for this. You can see a lot of the different options available here. We also have significantly more complicated components. So here's grid view. So this is a table component that has just about every single option that you could imagine. It supports pagination and automatic binding to backend search indices. It supports column sorting, column rearranging. You can specify custom templates for the rows. It is also able to bind to documents in Mongo so that when you change things in this grid view, it automatically updates in Mongo as well. And once again, the code required to specify all this is tiny. And this is the reason why we've been able to build so fast. And this is something that can only happen in Meteor. If you just use a front-end framework like React, then you can't make an integrated SDK that also updates the backend and integrates with your entire stack. So just a couple more examples. This lets you update names in here. And let's say that I want to update the phone number. And this all updates to the database. So if I were to open this in another screen or inspect in Mongo, that you can see that all the changes just persisted there. So I'm just about out of time. One last thing that I would like to say is it's really important to teach core Meteor concepts. So one thing that we've done is we've created a series of interactive tutorials for new engineers that teach core concepts about Tracker and other pieces of Meteor. So this is like a partially implemented template right here. And there's a particular function that you have to implement. And you have to understand a core concept in Tracker in order to properly implement it. As soon as you finish typing and it works, this number will increment and be green. And some of these are quite complicated. For example, this last one requires you to implement a reactive var. And we found that this is a very, very effective way of onboarding new engineers.